The Bellwether Dispatch. Week 1. What it is, and what it is not, being the same thing. I am at the moment seated in an old wooden chair, at an old wooden desk, in the hung darkness of an abandoned mill beside a frosted river at dawn in midwinter. The closest I shall come, I imagine, to a living death. It is an old crutch mill, and crutches still cling to the walls like unsolved math problems, and lay in boneyard heaps that one vaguely wishes to set afire, and there are the engine block remains of curious crutch-making machines here and there, and traces of moonlight skimming the upper rafters, flashing now and then like silver strings in the rotten gloom. I shall explain my purpose here, but to do that I must tell you first of Ronald Vinegar, and of his century-old weather report postcard service, the Bellwether Dispatch, which became, over its 8 weeks of life in 1916, something of a mania here in Lemon, something of a treasure hunt, something of a wild goose chase, and, as it would happen 100 years later, something of a thing that the town of Lemon has set itself the task of reenacting. So, for the next 8 weeks, every other Sunday, with most everyone in town engaged in the process, the Bellwether Dispatch will again be dispatched. Why would we do this, you may wonder? Simply, we hope to raise money for the rebuilding of the old town hall by accumulating subscriptions to the postcard service. The hope is that subscriptions to the weather service will extend beyond our borders, as it did in Ronald Vinegar's day. The dream is that the Bellwether Dispatch might infect the world, and that by the end of its run, whole 7 billion people on the planet will have signed up. And, in fact, someone in town has made the calculation of the profit to be had if such a thing were to arise. But, more completely, to my way of thinking, we are reenacting the events of 100 years ago because we long for the spark of mystery and wish to remind ourselves that we are strange. Hence, we have set ourselves this task for purposes of charity and history and eccentricity and self-recollection. And thus I should say, you are welcome, you are encouraged to sign up, and such information as to the how and what of that will be appended at the conclusion of all this talking. But of course the queer trouble is that Ronald Vinegar charged nothing for a subscription to his Bellwether Dispatch, and thus, to be true and proper, neither are the good people of Lemon. What profit there might be, considering the cost of stamps and the postcards themselves, as against the lack of any apparent incoming funds, is something I am happy to leave to the brighter magicians in town. So what exactly, you are wondering, is afoot? Quite simply, 4 new weather report postcards will be issued over the next 8 weeks, one every other Sunday, just as they were in the olden times. On those Sundays when a new postcard is not issued, there shall be interstitial narratives describing the results of our folly. Though our weather report shall be greatly freshened using modern persons, still yet we shall follow the weather divining method from a century ago, which meteorologic process I shall, sooner or later, lay out. Assisting me in this reenactment, there are 5 others who will be directly responsible for pulling the rabbit of the Bellwether Dispatch out of the hat of the universe, and these include the dour but astrologically inclined town librarian, a clumsy 14-year-old female courier who has no difficulty stumbling, the gossipy parish priest, famous for his eavesdropping and laziness, a nearly deceased janitor who has several times been found dead in the street, and a somewhat unrecognizable woman we have chosen to play the part of the innocent bystander, simply because she has never been known to speak and seems not from here, even though she has lived here her whole life. If you find all that repulsive to understanding, do not fret, hang on. I shall eventually, in time, explain. On the practical side, we shall be using a commemorative replicated version of the postcard that Ronald Vinegar himself used, which is fronted by an image of 3 fairy-tale gentlemen standing around a fire-filled bucket below a smiling moon. To one side of these cartoon figures there is a blank white space, where I am meant to transcribe the weather report when finally it is handed to me. I shall do this as Ronald Vinegar did, by candlelight, from memory, on a typewriter set here on the table before me. To further establish the darkness of this place, I should mention that I cannot yet, in the early dawn, see the typewriter, nor the postcards I am meant to use, nor the candle, nor the box of matches that I have been assured would be set out for me. But the quick truth is that I can smell each of these. The oil of the typewriter, the wax of the candle, the sulphur of the matches, the pulpy fragrance of postcards. So even if they are not there, I believe they are, which is the bench-back way of the world in any event, despite promises to the contrary. I should say at this point that my own participation in this folly is compromised, though I am at present glad to be here. But in fact, when originally asked to play the part of Ronald Vinegar at the town meeting last year, I quite clearly declined. I stood and said, "I am afraid I can be of no service there," and was greeted by an applause and laughter greater than I ever met in my many years on stage. Only later, as the meeting ended, and I was being roundly congratulated for being so vested in the spirit of the thing, did I learn that these very words, "I am afraid I can be of no service there," had been uttered by none other than Ronald Vinegar himself, a little more than 100 years ago, when he himself rejected the very idea of embarking on the Bellwether Dispatch. These sorts of coincidences cannot be denied their charm, and as I had not, until that moment, ever been clapped upon the back with such intimacy, or met so many smiles, in fact my fellow villagers at the meeting became unrecognizable to me, so bright and happy were their eyes as they came to shake my hand or pat my arm, and so used to their plain and somewhat hostile faces, that it was as though I was suddenly in another world, with me, another different person in it. In a place and as a person, I decided at that moment to be, and for as long as possible, remain. To follow the course of history, today's very first postcard, after it has been transcribed, will be hand-delivered by myself before 7 a.m. to Mr. Stanley Akers, current editor of the Lemon Times, who will then print it in this evening's edition of the paper. It was his ancestral version, the original founder and editor of the Lemon Times, one Deacon Day, who initially asked Ronald Vinegar to provide him with the weather report. And it was to that editor that Ronald Vinegar famously replied, "I am afraid I can be of no service there." And it was that editor who, after printing that first Bellwether Dispatch, made it instantly known that he never would again, that the Lemon Times could not condone the printing of such wildness that such unreliable persons as Ronald Vinegar provided. Thus, to this day, there has only ever been that one lone weather report, such as it was, in the Lemon Times, its editorial policy unswerving in this regard for the last 100 years. Until today, that is, when, after such a long reprieve, there will be a second. That first dispatch, printed in the Times on January 30th, 1916, provides the only real clue as to the tone of these weather reports, the text of which I shall read now. For Monday we shall have strong bees. To be Tuesday is shovels in the woods. Silver trees Wednesday, perhaps gold in the swamp on Thursday. Snow is amorous Friday snow. It is quite believable, though however not yet Saturday. What it is and what it is not, being the same thing. On Sunday, all the bred and brand new horses in a row. Lastly, these rains of strong, strong bees. P.S. Infinity. Deacon Day, of course, finding this doggerel repugnant, nevertheless on that day in 1916, had made room for it in his paper and could find no quick substitute. He printed it while squashing it thereafter. And yet, someone in town, some nascent cryptographer and reader of the paper, detected in that first weather report in the Lemon Times something quite other than nonsense. With its mention of amorous snow and of shovels in the woods and silver and gold, this detective surmised that a code was here to be cracked, that the Bellwether Dispatch was not in fact a ridiculous weather report, but a blurry system of clues which might indicate the whereabouts of the long-missing, long-rumored to be somewhere, buried treasure of Mr. Amory Snow. Shadowy form now crosses the mill floor, wending between the engine clumps and piles of crutches. Enough light that I may find the matches and spark a candle, and put my hands upon the ready postcards, and slip one within the platen prison of this old Underwood. In keeping with the history, our innocent bystander approaches with ungloved hands as cold as ice, and with numb fingers she begins to write down in the notebook she has brought the dying whispers she has just heard from the old janitor faking his death upriver. When done, she removes the sheet and hands it to me. I read through the dreamlike ribbon of her badly scribbled words once, and then twice, and then the mute bystander takes the page from me and departs. I gather myself for a moment, and then begin to type what I can from memory, the weather report for the week, in the blank space beside the fairy tale gentleman. And as I do, I feel a surge of warmth and wonder, for am I not more in the moment exactly joined into the realms of these old, unreal gentlemen, standing with them above their fire below a smiling moon? Am I not entirely myself as I compose it, the human equivalent of the Bellwether Dispatch, a thing made up and handed round and overheard and passed along, and making no sense, and yet, perhaps, in mischief and in secret, laying out the blurry clues to a long-lost treasure. Those curious about inaccurate weather reports, or eager to uncover a portion of the buried treasure of Amory Snow, or those who simply like postcards or subscribing to things that are free, may sign up by sending their name and address to bellwetherdispatch@gmail.com. If you would like only to see the postcard, make that intent known, and you will be given a secret address on the internet, which shall reveal it. Each postcard, real and virtual, will contain clues to a small pleasing treasure to be found somewhere in New Hampshire. A bag of doubloons is what the contents most resemble from the days of Amory Snow. Those finding the treasure are requested to take only a single sample of what is to be found, and to leave the rest for others. Finally, the only payment the town of Lemon requires is that you send photographic proof of your treasure finding, of yourself with the treasure at the secret treasure site, and that you send such images to bellwetherdispatch@gmail.com, that we here in Lemon might then proselytize in this manner, and achieve the great profit from multiplying 7 billion by the cost of stamps and subtracting that by a figure otherwise known as 0. Further information about the treasure hunt and postcards may be found at radioghost.com. Lastly, these rains of strong, strong bees. P.S. Infinity.